Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. ATSSA's virtual town hall is about to begin. Today's presentation will be approximately 60 minutes and will include a specific question and answer period toward the end of the program. You may enter a question for our speakers at any time by selecting the Q&A box on your Zoom toolbar. Thank you again for joining us. And now I want to turn this over to Stacy, ATSSA's President and CEO, to get this started.
Hey, thank you, Pamela. I want to also lend my welcome to everyone for joining us today. It's a pleasure to meet everybody virtually and be part of this exciting industry. It's got such a rich history, and it's been a privilege for me to be on this team for the last month and see the dedication to safety and saving lives on our roadways by everyone I've had the opportunity to come in contact with. Before we do anything else today, I just want to take a minute on behalf of the board of directors and the staff team at ATSSA, and I want to thank you for your membership and dedication to ATSSA and to our industry. You as participants in this this town hall today, but more importantly, you as a member of this organization. It has such a stellar reputation on Capitol Hill and throughout the roadway construction industry. That's really because of your dedication, your participation, and your membership. And we can't do what we do without you. So thank you for being part of this. And I can't tell you what an honor it was for me to come be part of ATSSA and follow in the footsteps of Roger Wentz. This is, I'd hope to have an opportunity to meet a number of our members before today, in person. But our face-to-face opportunities have been limited. And originally, I believe it was today or tomorrow, we were supposed to have our legislative fly-in, and we were all going to meet face-to-face. And since the situation we're in did not allow for that, I'm just excited to see how many of you have joined us in this format. Last I looked, we were close to 150 people that are joining us online today. I can't thank Nate Smith and Pamela Bouchard enough, and the entire ATSSA team who's helping us launch this new member service as well. Because our goal with these virtual town halls is to provide an on-demand, timely, and relevant insight that's going to help you as a member navigate what's ahead for our industry and those we serve. We didn't want to create just one more webinar or report about COVID-19. Instead, we're going to use this opportunity to create an interactive event for you to have access and ask questions from key leaders that are at the forefront of what's going on in our industry. These town halls this is the first one. They're going to be delivered on a regular basis over the coming months. And we're going to address issues at the forefront of your business and your jobs. They're also going to be recorded so that if you miss one or you want to share one with someone else in your organization, you can easily do that. We're going to make this one accessible through the COVID-19 page on our website. That page has been dedicated to the latest information on what's happening in our industry and at ATSSA related to COVID-19. It includes a detailed map on DOT projects in each state and what operating level they're at. And to access it, I just encourage you to go to ATSSA.com, click on the yellow COVID-19 banner at the top of the page, and you'll be able to access any of the latest information that ATSSA is putting out. Last, if there's something you feel that we should be addressing in these virtual town halls, I'd love to hear from you. I'm just gonna be honest, my name has a lot of consonants in it, and I am the new guy here following a successful tenure by Roger Wentz. So instead of trying to spell Tetschner for you today, I've set up an email that'll be a lot easier. So why don't you just use newguy@atssa.com. Send me an email anytime. I'm assuming with such a rich history, New Guy is going to work for me for the next 10 years. So please send any suggestions, comments, or just a note to say hello. I would love to connect with you. I'm going to turn the program back over to those that are here to help you. And thanks again for the opportunity to serve you as members of ATSSA. I look forward to connecting with each one. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nate Smith.
Great, thank you, Stacy. I really appreciate it. And on behalf of all the staff, we are excited that you're on board with us. Month one has begun. We are joined today by the Executive Director of the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, Jim Tymon. Jim serves as the head staff member of AASHTO, which represents 52 state DOTs across the country. And prior to his selection as Executive Director, Jim served as the COO and the Director of Policy and Management for AASHTO as well. Prior to his service at AASHTO overall, Jim had a long time career on Capitol Hill, culminating as staff director for the Highways and Transit Subcommittee as part of the Transportation Infrastructure Committee in the House of Representatives. We've been working with Jim for a long time, and he's been a great advocate for safety over the many years. We're also going to be joined today in a little bit by Congressman Brendan Boyle. Congressman Boyle serves as a congressman from the Pennsylvania 2nd Congressional District, which represents portions of Philadelphia. The congressman sits on the House Ways and Means Committee and the House Budget Committee, and as well as before he was elected to Congress, he served in the Pennsylvania State Legislature from 2009 until 2015. Additionally, Congressman Boyle is a member of the Congressional Road Safety Caucus, which ATSSA was really pushed to be created over the last couple of Congresses. So we really appreciate his longtime championship and leadership of road safety issues in Congress. But to start off, I think we're going to have Jim talk a little bit about what's going on at AASHTO, and then I'll throw some questions at you. But Jim, do you want to say a few brief remarks before we get started?
Sure. Well, thanks, Nate, for having me here, and congratulations, Stacy, and welcome to ATSSA. AASHTO and ATSSA have had a long history, great relationship. I've known Nate and knew Roger for a very long time. I look forward to establishing that kind of relationship, Stacy, with you. It's extremely important, I think, for associations like ours to have those kind of relationships so that we can work across the lines that we have on issues that come up. Obviously, this is a unique time for us right now in dealing with COVID-19, and I'm really happy that you guys are providing this platform for us to talk a little bit about how COVID-19 is impacting the transportation industry, and specifically from my member standpoint, how it's impacting state DOTs. It's an interesting time, and it's interesting in a lot of ways. One, it's a great opportunity for states in some areas to be able to move forward with projects and accelerate some of the projects that they already had underway because you're seeing so fewer vehicles out on the roads. So some of our members have actually taken advantage of the fact that traffic counts are down roughly 50%. And are moving forward with accelerating some of those projects. But those are really just projects that were already in the pipeline or already underway. States are really concerned right now that traffic count number that I referenced, the 50% reduction, is going to start to have an immediate impact on the revenue that they traditionally collect from gas tax revenues at the state level. And that is what funds the bulk of the state transportation programs around the country. So state DOTs are starting to have to take a look at what was in their pipeline to move forward with in the next quarter, in their next round of projects that they were going to put out to bid. And they're having to make decisions as to whether or not to move forward with those projects or not, knowing that they could see a significant reduction in state transportation revenue. So one of the things that we're doing at AASHTO, based on input that we've received from our membership, is we're asking Congress that as part of the next round of COVID-19 legislation, that they take a look at providing aid to states in order to be able to backstop this revenue loss that we're seeing, that we anticipate seeing at the state level for transportation-related revenue. We think that's going to have a real impact not only on private sector jobs for contractors and road builders, but for state DOT's employees. It's going to be a real budget crunch for them as you see state transportation revenues decrease. And we saw that in Pennsylvania, actually, and I see that the congressman has joined us. Governor announced about a week and a half ago that 9,000 state employees were going to be essentially put in this status where they were going to have to use leave or they were going to have to collect unemployment. And about 2/3 of that 9,000 are state DOT employees. And I think we're going to see other states faced with tough decisions like that as well.
Great, thanks, Jim. I appreciate that. And as you notice, the Congressman has been able to join us as well from, I think, Philadelphia. Is that where you're at today, Congressman?
Yeah, we're at the home office, AKA my house, here in Philadelphia. And it's great. I've actually been on the call the whole time, but I'm while perhaps on the younger side for Congress, I'm still learning the Zoom technology. So finally clicked the get myself on video. But I've been listening the whole time and really happy to join you, Nate, the new guy, Jim, and Pamela. Thank you all for having me.
Great, thanks, Congressman. I appreciate it. Do you want to say a few words about kind of what's been going on in Congress the last month or so, and your perception as to everything that's been going on?
Well, I mean, obviously, this is we use the term unprecedented. It's at least for the first time in a century since 1918, 1919 that we've had to deal with something like this. What is unprecedented, though, is the entire economic shutdown. First and foremost, I mean, my heart goes out to anyone who has been personally affected by COVID-19, either having it or having a close loved one. And of course, all of us are affected just in terms of our daily lives, having parents who we can't go visit because they're at an older age. So it's a challenging time for all of us. Now, in terms of the economy, I know we'll get more into that in terms of what Congress is doing. But this is unprecedented in American history. I mean, I voted on a $2 trillion package while sitting in the visitors gallery because of the need for physical distancing. Probably about 100 or so of my colleagues were up in the visitors gallery, and that was we believe the first time ever in the history of Congress, or certainly since the history of that building being expanded during the Civil War, that such a vote like that took place. So we are just in uncharted waters in so many ways. And happy to walk through the legislation that's already passed and what I see perhaps coming down the pike. Great.
First and foremost, our members, both the manufacturing side and the contractor side, have been deemed as essential employees by the Department of Homeland Security, which is great, and we obviously very much agree with that assessment. It really is incumbent upon individual states and governors right now to implement that guidance from DHS and ensure that those projects, as Jim commented on a moment ago, continue to be pushed forward at this opportunity of reduced traffic and significantly increased safety from our perspective of being able to get some great jobs done ahead of time, potentially under budget, and in a safer manner. So I guess, Congressman, to start, if you want to talk a little bit about some of the small business provisions that have appeared in COVID relief packages to date in Congress, and then we'll start looking a little bit more forward.
Right. Well, let me first just put things in proper perspective, because I think that this has just moved so quickly, we can lose sight of this. There have been 3 different coronavirus-related pieces of legislation that have passed. The one that has gotten the most attention by far is the one that is nicknamed, just used colloquially, as the stimulus, the most recent one that we passed. That was a $2 trillion stimulus. And again, in order to put things in their proper perspective, that is so large. It is 3 times larger the famous and controversial stimulus that was passed by President Obama right as he was only a couple months into office. That was $787 billion. Here we are, $2 trillion. And we're talking about going back to do more because that $2 trillion level might not have been enough. Now, in terms of what was in it that directly deals with small business, the small business portion of it is one aspect of it, and one of the biggest. Probably the aspect that's gotten the most attention is the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Provisions. That's approximately $350 billion. A series of loans and grants. Some of the money, a good portion of it, starts off as a loan, but provided certain provisions are met, it becomes a grant a little bit later on. I've been on a ton of calls with local business owners this week, and I've already picked up some feedback I'm hearing about things that need to be changed looking to the future, and I can get into them in greater detail. Probably the one aspect of this that has become the most challenging for business owners that I've heard is what at least I'm calling the 75-25 rule, the guidance that Treasury issued that no more than 25% of the funds could be used on what they deem as overhead. Essentially everything that isn't a paycheck into an employee's, that isn't money going into an employee's paycheck. So anyway, so there are many different aspects of it. The $350 billion for small business, I think, is very much needed, but it gets so complex in terms of the way it's being carried out and administered by the Treasury Department. I suspect, just looking ahead a little bit, Nate, that we will be revisiting some of these provisions to attempt to make it easier, because at the end of the day, the idea is that business take advantage of this and use it. If you make it so onerous that businesses decide that they don't want to do it, it very much defeats the purpose.
Absolutely. And Jim, you commented a few moments ago about AASHTO's proposal for a future COVID relief package to help ensure that DOTs are continuing under operations. That's something that ATSSA is excited to support and has supported over the last week or so since you made that call. Looking a little bit more down the road, if there were a future COVID relief package that included additional infrastructure investments, whether that was wrapping a highway bill reauthorization into a COVID relief or some other stimulatory mechanism, is there a fear by state DOTs that departments of transportation won't be able to meet their federal matches on any additional money that might come from Congress?
So that's a great question, Nate. There certainly is a concern among the state DOT community about federal match and the ability for states and localities to be able to come up with their contribution that traditionally goes into these projects. Usually on the highway side especially, it's usually an 80-20 split, where 80% of a federal project comes with from federal dollars, and then 20% comes from state or local. And the reality is that state and local government budgets are going to be squeezed significantly here as it relates to COVID-19. I mean, the fact that really the economy has taken a huge blow just in the last month, but then also, looking forward, at least for the next month and maybe even, into May, it's going to have a real impact on states and localities' ability to kind of provide that local share. So in anything that we're requesting of Congress, we're asking that that local share, the state and local share, be waived. But really, that first priority, that ask that we have up there is for $50 billion to help backstop the losses that state DOTs are seeing in their state transportation revenue sources, and that's mainly state gas tax revenue. Again, with that 50% reduction in travel for vehicles, we'll see a corresponding decrease in the amount of revenue that's going to be collected at the state level that's poured back into transportation projects. So really, that's the number one ask, because that'll help states continue to move forward with the projects that they were planning to do this year. And absent that infusion of federal money, they're going to have to pull back on projects that they were going to do. They're going to have to start looking for ways to save money within their personnel departments as well. And that'll mean potentially, furloughing state employees. So there's going to be some real tough choices that states are going to have to be making moving forward. The $50 billion will help that. There's also a longer term ask related to kind of helping the economy recover and stimulating it. And we do think that the best way to do that is to come up with a long-term surface transportation reauthorization bill that's funded at just much higher levels than we would traditionally do. We think you could double the size of the federal highway and transit programs, and that will really serve as a platform for economic recovery once we're past this issue with COVID-19.
That's a great way to frame that between relief and recovery, and they are two separate items. perhaps they're related. It's certainly they're related, and perhaps they're joined, but they are two separate items. Congressman Boyle, both the Speaker Pelosi and the President have indicated some interest in doing something on infrastructure as we go from relief to recovery through COVID packages going forward. There's been a little bit of a dance, how there seemed to be excitement and then a little bit of a pullback. Do you get any sense from House Democratic leadership as to thoughts on infrastructure going forward as it relates to some sort of relief or recovery package?
Yeah, well, first, the very last sentence that Jim said, I would love to, I hope someone got it, because I would like to use that verbatim in a future press release when I call on exactly using this kind of stimulus to essentially help revive our economy, because I believe we'll need it. Nate, as you know, I've been a long time supporter of doing a big infrastructure bill. I thought that it would have happened by now. I really thought that that would be a big sort of bipartisan win for President Trump in his first couple of years, and surprised that it hasn't happened to this point. A number of us on the Ways and Means Committee, including the chairman, have talked to Steve Mnuchin about doing this. Candidly, the White House internally is split on this. There are some folks like Secretary Mnuchin who like the idea. Clearly, President Trump's instincts are to do it. But there's always been opposition within senior folks within his administration who don't generally like that sort of government spending and tend to come from a more Freedom Caucus sort of orientation, including his new White House Chief of Staff. So that's where things stand at the moment. Do I believe that the very next bill that we'll do will include infrastructure? I wish I could say yes. I would say, unfortunately, probably not. I suspect it will be an increase in funds above and beyond what we already did in the most recent bill, which has been called the CARES Act, as well as attempting to refine those provisions I talked about that have, in putting together one of the largest bills ever, largest stimulus bill ever, and putting that together in the course of about 10 days. Obviously, there are going to need to be revisions and tweaks when things don't exactly work as intended. I think the next bill will see both an increase in funding as well as those sort of tweaks that I talked about. So let's call that phase 4. Then when we get on to a phase 5 bill, that's where I believe the opportunity is for a big, bold infrastructure plan. I mean, as well as I do, we're rated a D or D plus by every sort of council of engineers, both American and international. This is a perfect time to do it in terms of financing when we have interest rates that are de facto at 0. I'm a strong supporter of it. And final point that I'll make, just on something Jim said much earlier, about the concern that state and local governments will pull back because of their revenues being decimated. I was a state legislator for 6 years. I entered office right in the middle of the Great Recession. Was elected November 2008 and took office 2 months later. And in that November, December, January standpoint, our state budget lost over 15%. And that was a very representative of every other state's experience. We needed those funds. We can't just print money like the federal government. We needed those funds from the federal government. I strongly advocate for including, hopefully in our very next phase bill, direct aid to state coffers and local coffers in order to avoid exactly the kind of thing that Jim is concerned about.
So staying on that state theme for Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania is one of the states where the governor's office has looked to slow down projects and in some ways flat out stop projects during the height of the coronavirus pandemic going on in the Commonwealth. Have you had conversations at all within the state about opportunities to start those projects back up in the not so distant future?
Well, ironically, my brother is the ranking member of the committee that will be voting on this bill. There is now, unfortunately, a partisan fight between the Republican-controlled state legislature and the Democratic governor on when and how to reopen. I think that that's very unfortunate. In other states, you have seen bipartisanship. Even at the federal level, the bill that we passed, the CARES Act, the $2 trillion stimulus bill, passed unanimously. Imagine if just a month ago, anyone had predicted a $2 trillion bill, 3 times larger than the stimulus during the Great Recession, would pass unanimously. It would be unthinkable. So I think it's unfortunate what is happening recently in Pennsylvania in terms of this becoming a partisan issue. Look, at some point, every state is going to have to face this decision. It's not a matter of if we reopen, it's a matter of when. So figuring out the right timing to do it and the right way to do it, such as in a tiered approach, I think is something that we need to be figuring out right now, both at the federal level and at the local level. I will also add, specific to Pennsylvania, and if you read the Financial Times article on this a few days ago, you saw my quote. It is very concerning and kind of unusual that right now Pennsylvania leads the nation in terms of unemployment claims. It's unusual because generally our state's pretty representative of the nation as a whole. We generally are not one of the top 10 booming states. We're not one of the 10 worst off states. We tend to be a Goldilocks economy. And so the fact that right now, for the last 3 weeks in a row, we have led the nation in unemployment claims is something that deeply concerns me, specifically about my own state.
So, Jim, before coming to AASHTO, I commented that you were a long-time House Transportation Infrastructure Committee, maybe lifer, I'm not sure, staffer, lifer. Give us a couple of thoughts about Congress's ability, if a reauthorization of the surface bill, transportation bill, is not included in any recovery aspect of COVID-19, give us a sense about Congress's ability to enact such a long-term, robustly funded, as you commented, surface transportation highway bill in the months coming up. As we know, the current one expires October 1 of this year. Not only as we're coming out of a pandemic, but as we're going into an election too. So, talk about Goldilocks. That's the antithesis of the Congressman's Goldilocks comments in terms of timing. So give us a little sense about Congress's ability, and I think I'll pivot after that to you, Congressman, about your viewpoint on our ability to get something done later this fall. Jim?
So, as the Congressman mentioned, infrastructure seems to have been a common bipartisan theme really for the last several years. And so while this was going to be a difficult year, regardless of getting a long-term reauthorization bill done, just because it's a presidential election year, I still held out some hope that we were going to be able to get something done, because it's something that infrastructure investment is something that enjoys bipartisan support in the Senate as well as in the House. And I really think that if there was one major bill that they could have come together on, infrastructure would have been, that bill. Now, obviously, we've done this $2 trillion COVID-19 bill, and that was done. But that was, nobody could have projected that back in December or January. So, I do agree with the Congressman that this next bill is probably not going to serve as some type of a stimulus recovery type vehicle. I do think that Congress sometime, later in the spring or early in the summer, maybe before we get to that August recess, if they take recess, that might be an opportunity for them to sit down and say, all right, what bills do we have that we have to get done anyway that could serve as a recovery vehicle, as a stimulus vehicle? And I think that infrastructure is absolutely at the top of that list. It's something that, from a surface transportation side, has to be reauthorized before October 1st anyway. It's a great opportunity to go out there and infuse additional money into these programs and stimulate the economy. And you have the advantage of not having to do a series of short-term extensions starting October 1st that really tend to cripple the industry, if you ask me. State DOTs hate those short-term extensions because they're not able to plan for those big projects because they're not sure when that next round of federal dollars is going to come through. So I think this is a great time for Congress to come together to show that bipartisanship and find a way to get a long-term reauthorization bill done before October 1st at much higher funding levels. And it gives them something to go back and campaign on as well, right? It gives them the ability to go back to their districts, to go back to their states and say, hey, this is something that we were able to get done, and it's going to serve as a foundation to stimulate the economy in the long run.
So I'll just piggyback on your comment, Jim, about uncertainty being a devil as it relates to state departments of transportation. And the same goes for the manufacturing contracting side of our business. Is if state DOTs don't have that uncertainty, that flows very quickly downhill to our own members who aren't going to be making the items that are going to be going out on the road, and they're not going to be hiring the men and women to put those onto the road. So it quickly goes from DOT to private sector as well. Congressman?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Jim said, and I would offer perhaps advice for all of us, myself included, for those of us who would like to see a large infrastructure bill generally, and then one aspect of that going very big in terms of surface transportation. One of the pushbacks that we'll get, besides obviously the usual ones like cost and how you pay for it, one of the pushbacks we'll get is, oh, well, this isn't related to coronavirus. This is something that's outside of that, and you're attempting to shoehorn in. It'll be incumbent upon all of us, whether on the inside as elected official or as part of the advocacy community or in the industry, it'll be important for us to make the argument, no, this is coronavirus related. The reason why we so badly need to rebuild the American economy is directly because of COVID-19. And here is an excellent way to do it. It's economically sound. We're going to have to eventually pay these costs anyway. We might as well do it when the financing terms have never been better. And we have this large supply of folks who are looking for work. So as opposed to competing, when the unemployment rate is sub 4% and you're competing for a more expensive labor force. So that's the way I'm thinking, but I would offer that as guidance to all of us who would like to see that done. And I do hold out hope that later in the spring or the summer that you could see a very big infrastructure bill, or at least the surface transportation aspect of it.
One of the concerns that we as an ATSSA industry and roadway safety infrastructure industry have is if we get to a point where we do reauthorize the surface transportation bill this spring or early summer, or we get an additional infusion of infrastructure investments through a COVID recovery package, is ensuring that we have the men and women trained and certified to be able to do that work. And that's something that we're trying to pivot to do online and virtually. It's historically been done in a classroom style in person. Obviously, those have essentially ceased to exist during the time period. And so we're working with state DOTs to try and ensure that those types of virtual online training can be accepted so that we're prepped and ready to go to have the workforce ready to hit the ground running when Congress does take action on an infrastructure package. So before we get to any questions in the chat box, a final question for Jim and the Congressman. Congressman, what can ATSSA members do and people who are interested in this issue to try and push this forward? We're in a different time period right now. Stacy mentioned that this month was supposed to be our annual Advocacy Day in Washington, D.C., our fly-in. That's been postponed until right after Labor Day. Knock on wood that will be able to move forward and continue. So the traditional methods of coming to D.C. and meeting with your member of Congress aren't existing right now. So how can our members engage with elected officials at the state and federal level to try and get some action on some of these items?
Yeah, I absolutely making sure that you are calling and emailing elected officials as well as their staffs. I will tell you there's a lot of competition at the moment. I have never, and everyone who works for me has said the same thing. We have never heard from more constituents as we have over the last 4 weeks. And just to elaborate on this, about 4 weeks ago, right around that mid-March time period when it was clear that life for all of us was changing, we shut down all 4 of my district offices here in Philadelphia. However, we're still up and running, just everyone's at home working from home. The last couple weeks, we have set a new record each and every week for the number of constituent service cases that we've opened and that we've completed. So literally during the same time our physical offices are closed, we're actually busier than ever. And I just know personally the number of people who I know I've been friends with for a long time, or just happen to have my cell phone, who've reached out to me in real need of help, has been unlike anything that I've experienced. It dwarfs the Great Recession. So that having been, I give you that information because you have to get your voice heard. You have to be in there advocating, but also know that there are a lot of other voices there as well. This is where, frankly, having the association is so important, because between Nate and others who work for the association, you already have existing relationships with folks. And at a time like this, that makes things just a lot easier and much more effective.
Great. And Jim, for our members who are engaged at the state level and want to help their individual state DOTs continue, prosper, ensure that they're open for business, what's the best way for them to go about doing that?
Well, I think that, in the near term, the most important I think we can ask for, I guess, is support for that $50 billion pot of money to help backstop the lost state transportation revenues. The phase 3 COVID-19 legislation, the CARES Act, included about $25 billion for the transit industry. And what we're saying is state DOTs are faced with a very similar cash situation. It's just we're a couple of weeks kind of delayed from the revenue standpoint, and when we start to see that decrease in revenue compared to what transit agencies see more in real time associated with fare box revenue. So, we really, in order to us to be able to continue to provide those projects and deliver those programs at the state level, we're asking folks to reach out to their members of Congress, to advocate for state DOTs to get that type of assistance, the same type of assistance that we saw the transit agencies and the airports get in the CARES package, because that's what's going to help states continue with the projects that they currently have in the pipeline. I know one of the questions in the queue here is about the fact that state and local budgets are just really taking a huge hit right now. By kind of getting this money directly back to state DOTs, it'll ensure that it's put back into transportation projects. There's going to be a lot of pressure within all state and local budgets in order to be able to prop up really a range of services across the board. If Congress is able to put money aside specifically for state transportation revenue backstop, that'll really help make sure that the transportation projects that were planned to happen this year will still continue to move forward.
Great. Hey, Pamela, let's head over to the chat box. Can you offer us any questions that might be pending there?
Sure. The first one is that job site access for suppliers is different from state to state. Will there be a federal rule as it relates to the suppliers?
So Nate, I can take
Sure.
that. The nature of the federal program related to highway construction, it's usually pretty decentralized in that they allow the states to be able to set their own rules and regulations related to that. This is a little different in that it's, it could, I guess, be classified more as an OSHA type situation. But for the most part, right now, I think the state of play is that it's going to vary a little bit from state to state. Based on what the situation is in that state. One of the things that we've really seen within the state DOT community is a lot of information sharing, a lot of sharing of best practices on how to operate job sites in a way that still conforms with social distancing, that makes sure that those job sites have everything that they need in order to promote the right level of personal hygiene that we can from a hand washing or hand sanitizing standpoint. You know, we want to be able to keep these work sites operable and these projects moving forward, but we also want to make sure that the workers that are out there working on site have all the protections that they need so that they stay healthy as well. And we're trying to strike that right balance and make sure that that they have all the tools and the information necessary. And we're seeing that state DOTs are sharing that kind of information across the board, so that if South Carolina's got a great way that they're doing it, we're making sure that, you know, Arizona, New Mexico, or Rhode Island has access to those ideas as well.
Great.
Okay, another question or comment. Congress is working on a number of funding proposals from federal aid reauthorization to a possible aid package. Are you considering waiving state and local match requirements to account for the drop in state and local tax revenues as a result of COVID-19?
I can go ahead and take that. I think that basically everything is on the table. That is certainly something that will be looked at. There is typically a concern that states wouldn't meet their requirements and instead would shift funds elsewhere. I think in these sort of circumstances, those normal sort of concerns will really be relaxed. So yes, that is something that's in consideration. Before we get to that point, though, there need to get over the first stumbling block, which is a commitment that we are actually going to go down on this path, and that will be part of the overall coronavirus response / rebuilding our economy.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is just another comment. I think it's a big worry is that counties and cities depend on tax revenues from gasoline. And now with, you know, not as many cars on the road, those sales taxes are typically for transportation improvements.
I guess, Jim, my question to you on that is, especially with safety projects, and as you know, having been in this world for a long time, you know, states are responsible for the safety of all public roads, not just state-owned roads. Are there conversations with counties and cities on trying to get at least safety-specific dollars down to those locals to make those improvements?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, look, safety is always every state DOT's #1 priority. And actually this year, our president, Patrick McKenna, who's the director of the Missouri Department of Transportation, has picked safety as his emphasis area to really work through for this year. So certainly, I think as the dollars get squeezed, safety still remains kind of that #1 priority for states as they figure out how to allocate even scarcer resources. And so I would have to assume that kind of working with your cities and counties and making sure that the safety needs are met at least at some level is going on within state DOTs, even in this fiscally constrained environment.
Great.
Okay, Pennsylvania is one of only a few DOTs that have shut down, yet Pennsylvania has one of the highest rates of unemployment. States like Florida is pushing forward with $2.4 billion in roadway projects, and yet they have a high unemployment rate, but mostly that is dependent on the hospitality industry and how that's completely shut down. Does Congressman Boyle have an idea as to if this is at all connected? And if it is, potentially this would be an interesting model to study to understand the impact of our industry to the national workforce.
Well, thanks. Good question. The initial weekly job claims, that the first ones that came out, I think 3.5 weeks ago, where Pennsylvania showed that it was #1. That actually happened before, I believe, Governor Wolf put a freeze on the transportation project. So that wouldn't, it wouldn't be consistent with the possibility. But I think that, after this is over, all sorts of things are going to be studied about this and will probably be applied for the next century. The same way I know I've gone back to look at the experience of 1918 to understand what cities handled it in a better way, in a more proactive way, and what was the effect on their economy over the next year. I will share with you from that experience, economists all across the ideological spectrum have come to the same conclusion. The cities and states that were the most proactive in shutting things down right away ended up economically performing better a year out than those cities, like my own famous case, Philadelphia 100 years ago, was perhaps the city that was the worst hit by the Spanish flu, in part because they didn't shut things down. And famously, as was recently chronicled by the New York Times, went forward with a war bond parade where they had about 200,000 people closely packed together, leading to 14,000 people to die the very next week from the Spanish flu. So I think it's important, again, that we strike this balance and that we figure out the right way to turn the spigot back on, but do so in a way that doesn't end up getting us right back to stuck to where we are now, come a month or 6 weeks from now.
What is your opinion on who should have control of determining when states open back up?
Congressman, do you have a thought there?
Well, I know what James Madison and Alexander Hamilton thought, and they said the states, and that's where that's actually as our Constitution states as well. Again, speaking locally here in Pennsylvania, the schools it's already been announced the schools have been shut down for the rest of the academic year. So even if Congress were to pass a law tomorrow and the president were to sign it saying we're reopened, that wouldn't affect the fact that here in Pennsylvania, decision has already been made that the schools will be closed for the rest of the academic year. So the reality is that this needs to continue to be a federal joint effort, which, given our system of government, can sometimes be frustrating. It's certainly inefficient, but that is the system of government we've had from the late 1780s on, and it will continue to be a federal state hybrid moving forward on this, as in all things.
Those of us in highway construction industry in Pennsylvania are able and very anxious to get back to work and in compliance with CDC recommendations. Is there anything that can be done to get the highway projects restarted quicker? We have a lot of employees ready, willing, and able to get back to work.
So, again, I think that there are a lot of states that are developing best practices to try to find that medium to be able to continue construction work, but also to make sure that the construction workforce it remains as safe as possible. And my understanding in Pennsylvania is I think that PennDOT and the governor are putting together a team to look at how they can start to reopen construction projects and get things back on track when the health risks start to subside a little bit. So I think that Pennsylvania will be ready to jump right back in it as soon as you see a mitigation or a little bit of a reduction in the risks associated with what we're dealing with COVID-19. And I'm sure that they're looking at what other states have been doing in order to make sure that that work that is being done is done in a way that helps to keep the construction workforce safe. So I think that there's a lot of work going on around the country, and I think specifically in Pennsylvania, I think they're going to be chomping at the bit to get back out there to work. I know that the folks at PennDOT want that to happen as soon as possible, but the number one priority has to be the health and safety of the people that are working on these projects.
Yeah, what Jim nailed it on the head. I mean, that is exactly right, and that's the ultimate answer. Figuring out a way to do this, again, according to CDC guidelines and in a way that's consistent with health standards. Because once we get that plan, there are some real advantages to the fact that people are off the roads right now. Certainly as someone who has had to live with I-95 construction for about 120 years now, it seems like, but no exaggerating though, it started more than a decade ago. and is supposed to continue for a number of years to continue, the opportunity to take advantage of such a drop in vehicle volume is a tremendous opportunity. So as soon as that can be figured out in a way that is safe, I do look forward to it happening.
Great. And Pamela, I think we have time for just one more question.
Okay. The stimulus package of 2009 was a great tool for stimulating the economy. However, one major flaw in it was the timeline was consolidated to a 2-year use program. Will the potential upcoming package allow for a longer term of use? The challenge is with contractors was gearing up for additional work, but then facing layoffs after only 2 years.
You know, I guess my first reaction to that was our comments earlier about how ideally there would be a large, robustly funded multi-year surface transportation bill reauthorized later this year. You know, and if we can add additional investments to that vehicle, to that mechanism, I think that would be ideal. That gives you 5 or 6+ years of certainty, and through a federal aid program that already exists and already has a proven ability to get dollars from the federal government to the states and then out to the road. So, you know, I think that point is very well taken, and it's something that we're working on. Jim and Congressman, I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Congressman, you want to?
I would just say I agree with your point, Nate, and the fact that it's already scheduled to be up for reauthorization in about 4 or 5 months might prove to be advantageous in this situation.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, you know, we've heard a lot of complaints about kind of that shovel-ready aspect of the 2009 bill, and look, there were some advantages to that, in that it really did get people to work quickly, but it did have kind of that curve where we saw kind of a steep uptick and then, you know, a little bit of a drop off. We're certainly supportive of kind of doing it in a way that allows states to pick the projects that are the best fit for that state. A state might say, you know what, I've got a lot of these maintenance type projects that I really want to get at right away, and they pour money in early on to those kind of projects. But some states may see this as an opportunity to really go after some of those big projects that have been on the shelf for a while that they haven't had the funding to do. A long-term reauthorization bill, it's, you know, 5, 6, 7 years at substantially higher funding levels, will give states the ability to do all types of projects, and it will help sustain the industry in a way that's more strategic, as opposed to just a one-time infusion of cash that you're not sure if it's going to be supported on the back end. So we're certainly supportive of a long-term bill as a way to really not only address the infrastructure needs, but really support the industry in the long run.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And I think that wraps up our Q&A session. Pamela, did you have any last words?
No, we just thank everybody for attending today. We appreciate your flexibility with the change of platform. This this session has been recorded. It will be posted within 24 hours on ATSSA's COVID-19 webpage. You will also get a survey. We ask that you take the time to fill out that survey, as your responses will drive the content of future town hall meetings. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.